Okay, good afternoon, everybody. We're doing organizational behavior management, chapter 11, managing conflict and negotiations. Now, conflict, believe it or not, is a healthy thing. Everybody usually looks at conflict as something really, really bad. Um, if you don't have conflict, you don't have growth, and it's not normal. It's like a family that doesn't fight, or couples that don't ever fight or disagree. It shows that it's not a normal situation. A normal situation, people have differing opinions, but the issue is how do you resolve the conflict, the civility, the classiness, if you will, of how it's done. You make sure that people come out feeling all right about themselves. Then you know you've done the right thing. So tonight we're going to talk about that, managing conflict and negotiations. Remember, ladies, those of you who are in the land of Zoom, please feel free to chime in if you have any questions. We're also going to interrupt the presentation in the middle to just review some terms as they come up. Okay, why are we not working today? Okay, we're having some technical difficulties. Here we are. Learning objectives. Explain the contemporary perspective on conflict. Describe the causes of intergroup conflict within a group. Identify several consequences of dysfunctional intergroup conflict. Compare approaches for managing conflict through resolution. Summarize how organizations stimulate constructive intergroup conflict. Understand the differences between win-win and win-lose negotiations. And by the way, you want to do a win-win. Nobody wants to leave a negotiation feeling like they've lost. Give examples of different types of negotiation tactics and explain how negotiation effectiveness can be increased. Let's do the introduction. To perform, interdependent individuals, meaning individuals that depend on each other, and groups must establish a working relationship. You can't be out at odds. If you are at odds, you will then ultimately, be like the Titanic and the iceberg. You're going to have a very, very bad ending. You're not going to be able to, get along, and you're going to have many, many problems. Across organizational boundaries, remember, within the organization is full of different kinds of departments and personalities, and as such, we need to know how to navigate and how to interact. Also, between individuals and among groups, such as interdependence, may foster either cooperation or conflict. Because remember, once you depend on each other, there's always going to be some sort of conflict. Just like in your personal relationship, spouses depend on each other, that interdependence does lead to issues. Within the workplace, if you think about it, if I depend on your report, you have to write a report or you have to furnish a report to me by the first of the month, and you're one of these procrastinating types and you hand it in 2 or 3 days later, that means for those 2 or 3 days, I fall behind. And then my boss is upset at me. Where's your report? And I'm saying, what do you want from me? The other team, the other person didn't have it. Then they'll say, well, stay on top of it. Why don't they have it? Speak to his boss. It ends up being a big to do. And we want to be able to avoid that as much as possible. Intergroup conflict is inevitable, but neither inherently good nor bad. So conflict, as I said before, can be a good thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. Too much or too little conflict can have negative consequences. If you have too much conflict, obviously you won't get things done. And too little conflict, there'll be less creativity, as we'll mention. Some conflict situations produce nothing positive, while others improve decision quality and employee relations. And the critical issue is not whether conflict exists, but how it is managed. And that's really what I said in the beginning. How do you deal with it? Person can, if you've ever read the Dale Carnegie book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, they talk to you about how to deal with giving criticism. Nobody likes to get criticized. Nobody likes to feel that someone is unhappy with their work. So you have to come up with a creative way to criticize without having the person realize that they are being criticized. Functional conflict, a confrontation between groups that enhances and benefits the organization's performance. Without it, there'll be little commitment to change, and most groups will become stagnant. Just think of it this way. If you go to a gym and all you do is lift up the 5-pound barbells, chances are you're not going to really tone muscle that way. You need to have resistance. So there needs to be resistance in order to really come up with the best ideas. So for example, if I'm having a brainstorming meeting and everybody just says, yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, that's an idea. What do you think is going to happen, ladies? What happens if everybody likes to have groupthink and just think the same way just to get it over with? What happens to the work? Anybody? Zoya, Ahuva, Diana, anybody want to chime in? What happens to the quality of work when everybody's just Yeah, it's good enough. I agree. I agree. What
It's
happens?
lowered. Nobody's challenged. Nobody's
Okay, so there's no challenge. Zoya, you wanted
also
to...
with time, people, I guess, work less. Not
Right.
work less, but like they
Well,
don't even try to work
so
better.
there's no intensity. There's no
Yeah,
urgent.
when it's to the bare minimum, they don't want to. They're not challenged.
Right. There's no sense of urgency. You're all going to agree. So it's a problem. And then you have yes men. You don't want to be a yes man. So functional conflict can lead to increased awareness of problems, result in broader, more productive searches for solutions, and facilitate positive change, adaptation, and innovation. So in other words, it's not a bad way of doing things. If as long as it's functional and it leads to increased awareness of problems, results in broader, more productive searches for solutions, as long as it facilitates positive change, adaptation, and innovation, it's a good thing. Dysfunctional conflict. We put the fun in functional, right? Confrontation or interaction between groups that harms the organization or hinders, prevents the achievement, or holds back the achievement of organizational goals. Such conflicts should be eliminated. The same level of conflict that creates a healthy, positive movement towards goals in one group may be disruptive and dysfunctional in another. Again, one level of conflict that creates healthy, positive interaction in one group because of people's attitudes can create dysfunction somewhere else. So you really need, for what this part of the slide teaches us, that you really have to know your groups and teams and understand what the answer, what the dynamic is over here. Like what's, like what do we need to do to make this group function? In order to make this group function, they need a certain interaction. So that interaction for them is appropriate, whereas the same interaction somewhere else will be inappropriate. We kind of touched this in when I taught, some of you were in my principles of management class. Some principles of management class, we talk about openness to experience, or agreeableness. Those are some of the characteristics of managers, of people, but with respect to managers. So agreeableness in one context or one group of employees would work, but being agreeable with another group of employees with different attitudes and different ways of thinking would be absolutely detrimental. So again, there's no one solution, there's no one answer to everything. Again, same level of conflict that creates a healthy, positive movement towards goals in one group may be disruptive and dysfunctional in another. A group's tolerance for stress and conflict can depend on the type of organization it ultimately serves. Exhibit 11.1 is a little bit confusing. I don't like the way it's set up. I want to focus on the fourth row, organization characterized by. So an organization can be characterized by slow adaptation to environmental changes. That's going to be very, very bad. It can lead to low organizational performance. Few changes, little stimulation of ideas, apathy, stagnation. Positive movement towards goals is high level of performance. It's a functional way of behaving, and the level of intergroup conflict could be optimal in that situation. Innovation and change, search for problem solutions, for problem solutions, and creativity and quick adaptation to environmental changes. Then you could have disruption, which is dysfunctional, and of course, this is a result of high intergroup conflict, and of course, this will lead to low organizational performance. You see how I'm reading it? I'm starting off with the organization characterized by, and then I'm going to my left, and then ultimately to the right. I think this chart should have been made with the organizational characteristics in the front, in other words, in the first column. But okay, nobody asked me. I didn't write this PowerPoint slideshow. It was gifted to me by McGraw-Hill. But anyway, moving along. Disruption is a attribute of a dysfunctional organization. Interference with activities, coordination difficult because everyone has their 2 cents to put in. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone all of a sudden becomes a subject matter expert. And of course, the ultimate result of this will be chaos. And of course, all of these leads to low organizational performance. Anybody have any questions before we move on? Did you see how I read the chart? Does it make sense to you? Yes, no, maybe? Yep. Okay. Let's move on. Conflict and organizational performance. Every organization has an optimal level of conflict that generates positive performance. Just think of it in terms of a gym. I like using the gym as as a as an example. I missed the gym because of COVID. All gyms are closed in New York City. But the bottom line is that some form of conflict is healthy. And again, without it, we've mentioned before, you're not going to have any real innovation and real changes. So that's something we need to keep in mind. So when conflict is too low, performance can suffer. You have apathy. You have a kind of a feeling of there's no urgency in getting things done. Innovation is less likely to happen. The organization may have difficulty adapting to its changing environment because the changes may be happening so rapidly in the environment. But if you don't have enough conflict, there's nobody going to be there. You know what? Maybe we should do something about it. You need to have somebody that kind of riles everybody up and gets everybody, like a call to action. If you have people that are just like, then what ends up happening is you have an organization that's like a block of Jello. Go try to nail a nail into a block of Jello. What happens? The nail has nowhere to establish itself, nowhere to catch on. So an organization where everyone's like, yeah, why not? No, we don't want to fight about it. We don't want to fight about it. Somebody just made a statement. That statement is wrong. That's going to cause, if we're going to go with that person's idea, it's going to cause problems down the road. So there's nobody willing to make that call or to get up and say, no, that's wrong. Then you'll have everyone basically walking off a cliff, and it won't be a good outcome. And of course, this is because the organization has difficulty adapting to its changing environment, and the survival of the organization can be threatened. When the conflict level is too high, the resulting chaos can also threaten the organization's survival. So Exhibit 11.2, there are different types of interdependence. There's pooled interdependence. The first one, people's work is pooled, and then, of course, the pool of those individuals in the group go towards the goal and go towards accomplishing the goal. And the sequential, one goes into two, and then there's reciprocal. A goes to C, C goes back to A, C goes to B, and B goes to C, and of course that reciprocity helps the group attain its goals. So those are the different types of conflict that can arise because of different types of interdependence. In the last one, we have reciprocal because everyone is reciprocal to each other. If there is a break in that reciprocity, I know it's a hard word to pronounce sometimes, but if there's a break in that reciprocal interchange or exchange, then it's kind of like a high-end sports car. If one little something breaks in that high-end sports car, it's going to wreak havoc and not work. Causes of intergroup conflict: goal differences. Conflict can arise between groups' mutually exclusive goals, which don't depend on each other. Limited resources that must be allocated. People are fighting for them between groups. So you have, it's mine, it's mine, it's mine. I want it. No, we should get the project funding. We should get the project funding. Different time horizons needed by groups to achieve their goals. Some people need more time. Some people need less time. So all that is going to impact. Did anybody have any questions? I just heard a mic get unmuted. I don't mind if you mute your mics, but if you want to ask a question, please feel free. Anybody had any questions? Okay. Causes of intergroup conflict. Factors that can cause groups to form differing perceptions. Status incongruence. Big word. Conflicts concerning the relative status of different groups. Of course, it's attitudes. Inaccurate perceptions often cause one group to develop stereotypes about another group, about being lazy, about not being creative, and of course, different perspectives, which is always something that can cause intergroup conflict. Consequences of dysfunctional intergroup conflict. Groups placed in a conflict situation tend to react in fairly predictable ways. Changes occur both within and between groups. Changes within groups increase group cohesiveness, which is good. Emphasis on loyalty, rise in autocratic leadership, which is not good. And of course, focus on the activity. Sometimes when you focus on the activity, you tend to get tunnel vision, and you only focus on one thing and on nothing else. Changes between groups, it could have distorted perceptions, negative stereotyping, decreased communication, and that is indicative of a silo mentality when you have factions or departments within an organization that just care about themselves. They're kind of like, we're the most important. No, we're the most important. So what happens is that each of those silos refuses to communicate with the other departments. And of course, then you have infighting and even sabotage, where people, for various reasons, such as self-dealing. They want to, they want to make themselves look better, and of course they want to, push their own agendas ahead, and that'll cause all kinds of issues down the road. Now, Exhibit 11.3, again, I don't like the way it's really set up, but basically the XY axis is divided up between external focus and internal focus, between highs and lows. So you have accommodating or soothing, which is defined as allowing other groups to win, which is always a good way to look at things in a sense that is kind of like looking at everyone at the same time. There's also problem solving or collaboration, working together to solve problems, compromising, finding acceptable solutions so everyone feels good. And that really is the best way to go about any conflict resolution. That is, the middle is the best, because everybody, as long as, like, nobody wants to leave a loser. Imagine a game where everybody wins. That's something that will make everybody happy. Unless you have the type of person that always has to win or always has to be right. Avoiding, ignoring, or steering clear of other groups, very, very bad. That's low external focus and low internal focus, and of course, low external focus and high internal focus, dominating, working to dominate and control, which is a bad thing. Managing conflict through resolution. Managers must live with intergroup conflict, so they must learn to manage it. Sometimes there's issues of domination. Then you have to that you may have to have accommodation as a part of your methodology. You look at your problem solving. Sometimes people avoid things. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. Again, I can't give you one answer for every situation, but here's the general guideline. If by avoiding this problem, the problem doesn't go away, meaning it's not like you gave in because you avoided it and you made that other person feel good and that's it. They're good to go and they don't need any more attention. They'll just, feel good about themselves and move on. But if you, by avoiding it, you embolden the other group or the other person to feel like, look, I have a victory. Now I can take advantage again and again and again. Then you can have a bully situation, which of course is disastrous and really, really bad. And of course, compromising wherever you can. Dominating approach. Used on important issues where you are certain you are right and where the benefit of a resolution outweighs the possible negative feelings by the dominated group. So in other words, you put your foot down and say, this is the way it is. I'm not here to ask you your opinion. I'm here to tell you what we're doing. I'm the subject matter expert. Now, this could be very, very useful if we're dealing with a decision that needs to be made rapidly and there really is no time to sit there and deliberate. So somebody has to take control of the wheel and drive the bus. Accommodating approach used in disputes that are of greater importance to other groups than they are to yours. So if it's not so important to you, you don't really care about it, so you accommodate the other person. Think of it as a spouse, right? One spouse really, really wants to go on a certain vacation, and you don't really care one way or another. So you accommodate them. Yeah, sure, I'll go where you want to go. And this way, you let the other person feel good. You don't really care. It doesn't really impact you, so why not? But again, sometimes people feel like, listen, if I accommodate too often, what's going to happen is when we accommodate too often, people are going to feel, again, emboldened to be able to take advantage of you. And nobody wants a situation like that where people will feel like they could be taken advantage of. Yeah, every time you want something, I have to give in. Again, sometimes people will just fight just to show that I'm not weak, which sometimes has to be done and sometimes doesn't have to be done. Again, it really, really depends on the environment that you're basically working in, and that's how you have to roll, so to speak. Avoiding using primarily as temporary and expedient means to buy more time. You avoid the issue, but again, as I mentioned before, if that avoiding cuts it off at the pass, you've placated the person. Okay, I'm not fighting with you. Okay, you win, fine. But if that emboldens the other person to become a bully, then you have issues. Compromising, good backup approach when other approaches fail to resolve the issue. Everybody gives in. Problem solving, used when groups are willing to invest time and effort to reach a resolution that maximizes everyone's outcome. And that's a beautiful thing. But unfortunately, many people don't want to go down that route because, of course, they have the need to win. Figure 11.4, an overview of intergroup conflict. So you have in the left box causes of intergroup conflict, interdependence, pooled, sequential, reciprocal. So there's an interdependency. So everyone is waiting on the next guy. That can cause conflict and stress when people are behind schedule. Goal differences, mutually exclusive goals, limited resources, different time horizons. There's perceptual differences, as I mentioned, status incongruence, which you mentioned, inaccurate perception and different perspectives. These lead to intergroup conflict, which then lead to consequences of dysfunctional conflict or consequences of functional conflict. So you have good conflict, which is functional, and bad conflict, which is dysfunctional. So let's start with the dysfunctional conflict. Changes within the group, increase in cohesiveness, rise in autocratic leadership, focus on activity, emphasis on loyalty, even within the dysfunctional. And the changes between groups are the distorted perceptions, negative, stereotyping, decrease in communication. Within the functional realm, you have awareness of the problem because you're functioning properly. You don't have that tunnel vision. You're not just, fixated on the target. You see the whole picture. So you're aware of the problem. You search for solutions, change and adapt, and of course you have innovation. And then you have conflict resolution approaches. We mentioned before dominating, accommodating. You mentioned dominating sometimes has to be done. You have to put your foot down. This is what we're doing. I mean, Trump did it with COVID. He said we're closing the borders to China. Finished. He was raked over the coals for that, but the bottom line was it was a great call. In fact, I would criticize him slightly. He said, I wish he would have closed the door on Europe as well. Basically closed everyone from coming in, and that would have done a lot. But again, it's hard to blame people or to question people's judgment because I'm not sitting in that position. I don't have all the data. I don't know what's going on, and it's kind of hard to be right in everything with an extreme situation that we have in front of us. And then, of course, that leads to positive movement towards organizational goals if it's from a functional aspect. And, of course, that consequence of functional conflict will lead to organizational survival. But the dysfunctional conflict will slowly eat away at the core of the organization and weaken it from within and cause it to topple over like a straw man. Stimulating constructive intergroup conflict, lack of any disagreement can lead to suboptimal performance and inferior decision making. One of you had mentioned, I don't remember which one he mentioned, that poor performance will be an outcome of this yes man kind of mentality. Lack of conflict may prove beneficial in the short run, but can lead to situations where one group holds tremendous influence over another, and you don't want that. Increasing conflict can be effective antidote for groupthink, which is dangerous when everyone's thinking the same way just for the sake of agreement. That's a great way to create a disaster. Let's move on. Stimulating constructive intergroup conflict, strategies for increasing conflict, bringing outsiders into the group, altering the organization's structure, stimulating competition, and using program conflict, otherwise known as devil's advocacy, where you look at both ends, both sides. Negotiations, two or more parties attempt to reach acceptable agreement in a situation characterized by some level of disagreement. So negotiations can take place between two people, within a group, between groups, over the internet. And that's what we're doing now. We're not negotiating over the internet, but we're communicating through the internet. And I will say this, the new normal will have companies that are going to sell their buildings and work virtually, or as I predict, they're going to rent spaces and kind of these, what do you call those places where, you can rent spaces for an hour and work there? I forgot what it's called. Smart space. Smart space.
We work. Yeah.
We work, right. I don't know why I was saying smart space, but we work, where basically you don't want to waste money, tens of thousands of dollars to have a bunch of floors in a building. You have to have a meeting with a client, you book a conference room, and goodbye, Charlie, you're good to go. That's going to be the new normal because there are going to be a lot of people out there that are going to be working from home. And as I mentioned, there's a good possibility that many in the education community, both in colleges, graduate schools, and of course in elementary and high school, will also have to work from home, either part of the time, all of the time. We don't know what's going to happen, but definitely negotiations are going to happen over the internet. There'll be less travel. Some great things could actually happen because of COVID. One of the positive things, I don't want to go off the rails too much, One of the positive things in it, people are saying that in LA, people are able to see buildings they were never able to see before. You know, LA, I don't know, has anybody been to LA here ever? Um,
Yes.
so I've been up that hill. I forgot what it's called, that hill, that park where you could see the
Grand Canyon, Hollywood Hills.
Hollywood Hill. Oh yeah, you're from there.
Go there.
So you could literally see smog. I mean, you could see this black filth. And now I'm told that because of the shutdown and the stay-at-home edict, people are not driving as much. So the earth is getting a chance to breathe again. And again, I don't want to sound like a tree hugger, although there's nothing wrong with loving the environment, but you know what I mean. It's better. So there are a lot of changes that are going to happen in the way that people interact, and perhaps people will be things will slow down a bit, and people won't be as much of a rush as they are in now. We'll see. Time will tell. Negotiations have at least 4 elements. Some disagreement or conflict exists. There's some degree of interdependence between the parties, which is good because that'll drive them to compromise. The situation is conducive to opportunistic interaction. Again, people will try to, deal with opportunism. And of course, there exists some possibility of agreement, which is always important. The classic, win-lose negotiation is basically a zero-sum game. There's an assumption of limited resources. I gotta have them, you can't have them. Also known as distributive negotiation and the process of distributing scarce resources. And there's always going to be a winner and a loser in that kind of situation. On a win-win, each party gains without a corresponding loss for the other party. You don't have to have this competition. And again, if you want to really inject the finite versus the infinite mindset, this is more of an infinite mindset where you're looking for the win-win to make people happy, to make people feel open with each other. Doesn't mean everyone gets all they wanted, but at least I get some of the things I wanted, you get some of the things you wanted. An agreement has been achieved, which leaves all parties better off than they were prior to the agreement. So there's some negotiation tactics over here. I'm going to go back to my email over here. First, we'll talk about splitting the difference. I don't know if you've ever seen this. There's a cable show I love watching because I love history and I love all kinds of relics. It's called Pawn Stars, where you have a pawn shop in Nevada, Gold and Silver Pawn Star. People come in and they want to pawn rare books, rare baseball cards, stamps, you name it, they want to pawn it, instruments. And then you have this negotiation. The seller wants $15,000 and Rick or Chumley will say, I can give you 10,000 most, and I can give you 10,000. And then he says, no. And then I say, okay, I'll give you 12,000. And the guy says, you know what, meet me somewhere in the middle. Let's split the difference. So when people start talking like that, then they're trying to come to some middle ground. The nibble, negotiation tactics, asking for little things at a time, kind of nibbling away like a mouse. Let's see the other ones. I actually went through the trouble. There's no trouble here, but I went through the process of as I was preparing. Yeah, okay. All right, so let's look at good guy, bad guy. This is a great website. Can you see my screen? Ladies?
Yes.
This is very good. Peter Barron. I like this one. They have a whole slew of negotiation tactics. So summary, pretending to be on a counterpart side while consulting another party who keeps vetoing deal points. The good guy, bad guy technique is very similar to the tactic of higher authority, but is much more specific. With good guy, bad guy, one person pretends to be on your side and appears to help you make the deal, but every time you strike a deal, the good guy marches off to the bad guy for final approval. This is kind of like good cop, bad cop. Naturally, the bad guy will renegotiate the deal you have worked out with the good guy. Anytime you get into this scenario and do not expose the technique, you can end up with devastating consequences. And here's an example. I always love examples, but this is a pretty dirty trick, as you can see. If you have
I
ever...
know cops who do that. Like,
what?
I saw a situation where 2 cops did that. Like, our neighbor called the cops on us for making noise. So one was the good guy and one was, like, the bad guy in the situation.
Yeah. Yep. So here's an example. If you've ever bought a new car, most likely you've experienced the frustration of being in a good guy, bad guy situation. After you have the test driven the car, the salesperson takes you into the closing room to draw up the initial deal. Since the salesperson cannot approve anything himself, he marches off to the sales manager, the bad guy, to get the manager's input on the deal. Then the salesperson returns and says that you are close, but the original deal will not work. What is scary is that the dealership goes through this process whether your offer is a good one or a bad one. So this is terrible. That's why when you negotiate, you have to be, I hate to say this, a bit piggish sometimes.
Did you ever like use this technique? Does it work?
I wish I would have used this technique. I've never used it, but I should have. I'll say that. I should have, could have, would have, but didn't. It definitely would have worked to my favor. Let's do something else. Nibbling. We'll go through all of them. Nibbling. I wish I could play this video and have you hear it. I still have not figured out how to do that with video. Let's just see. Video settings. Let's just see. Enable HD. Touch on my appearance. Turn off my video. Just trying to figure out a way of doing this. I asked actually somebody show me this, but they couldn't figure it out actually. Hide now. Did not see video troubleshooting. Okay. I'm sure there's a way. Share screen. Let me just see. Enable the remote control of applications side by side. Maximize window. Okay. I'm not sure how to do this. So anybody can figure out how to show a video through Zoom and have you guys hear it. I'm just curious. I'm going to play this. I want to know if you can hear it.
Bob Gibson here. The most common tactic.
Can you hear that?
No, I couldn't hear.
You could hear?
No,
I can't
I couldn't hear. Yeah.
Mm.
It has to do with the settings and audio. Something with audio. Who knows? Or...
Yeah, I think because one of my professors, he just turned on the video on his computer and we could hear it.
So where's the audio here? Let's figure this out.
It's probably either under audio or.
Where's our audio? Right here.
sharing.
Right here. Audio. All right. Recording profiles. There's a feedback, keyboard accessibility, audio. Automatically join audio by computer when joining a meeting. Okay, I want that. Where else? What else do you have? Maybe it's in general?
Either that or screen sharing. That's.
Well-
I mean, what else would it be? I'm not sure.
Well, we are screen sharing. A share
Maybe
screen.
it's under.
Side by side, maximize. I'm gonna just pause the video for a minute. So I hope you enjoyed that video on nibbling. Then it's something called joint problem solving. Let's find it over here. Website, thoughtexchange.com. Collaborative negotiation, also called constructive principles of interest-based negotiations approach that treats the relationships as an important and valuable element of what's at stake, while seeking an equitable, fair agreement as opposed to always conceding in order to sustain the relationship. So that's interesting, and we have that taken care of. There's also, let's see if there's a joint. Let's go look at joint